by the Aberdeen Group and sponsored by LogMeIn. During this webinar, we will focus on the importance of mobile engagement in retail and how successful companies are making the most of their mobile engagement strategies. Our presenters today are Omer Minkara, Research Director of the Contact Center and Customer Engagement Management Practice here at Aberdeen Group, Ross Haskell, Senior Director of Products for BoldChat by LogMeIn, and Ryan Brumund, Director of Solutions at 24/7 Intouch. If you'd like to read their full bios, please use the drop-down arrow below their photos on the left side of your screen. I encourage you all to submit your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A field at the top left of your screen. We will facilitate a Q&A at the end of the presentation and try to address as many of your questions as possible. Also, on the right of your screen, you'll see the resource section where you can find today's presentation deck. It is now my pleasure to turn the webinar over to Omer Minkara.
Great. Thank you, Bennett, and hi, folks. Once again, welcome to our webinar, and we have a great session prepared for you today. But first, what we'd like to do is we'd like to talk about what we're about to learn during today's webinar. That is, what are the benefits of mobile engagement, getting mobile engagement right as a retailer. On your screen, you're looking at three different metrics that are near and dear to many retail executives' hearts. Metrics such as customer lifetime value or growth in company revenue. What we learn through our research on the topic is retailers that get mobile right, that design a best-in-class mobile strategy, are seeing the year-over-year performance growth that is illustrated right here. Outcomes such as 15% growth in company revenue. So part of our objective from today's webinar is to help you accomplish, if not beat, those results by designing and executing a top-notch mobile strategy. How are we going to do that? Well, we'll go on a journey. We'll go on a journey that will take us through different steps. The first step in our journey will be talking about what mobile engagement is. There's a lot of confusion that we see in the marketplace around what mobile as a term stands for. Is it referring to devices? Is mobile a channel to begin with? So we'd like to dissolve that confusion as part of the webinar. And we'll also talk about the impact of mobile on retailers. We'll look at it from different perspectives. We'll take a look at what we learned from the 2015 holiday season, trends such as Black Friday and Cyber Monday. How do they resonate as far as the mobile strategies go for retailers? We'll take a look at the best-in-class practices in mobile engagement. We'll take a look at omni-channel and what it means for mobile interactions. And we'll also take a look at proactive communications, going beyond reactive into proactive. And along the way, we'll be having a dialogue with our co-speakers, both Ross and Ryan, to learn about their expertise and insights as we go through. And please don't forget, if and when you have any questions through the journey we'll take today, please send them along and we'll answer them in the order they come. With that, one of our few housekeeping items is reminding that we in Aberdeen are using a research methodology that dictates the way we capture data, the way we analyze data. So what that means is for you, the best practices we'll be sharing today are not just some ideas that we have came up with. Those are what we learned from your peers who have participated in our surveys and shared what works in their businesses. And the way we came up with that is by understanding what your peers' performance is looking like. Are they best in class? By looking at their performance across different metrics. Once we identify who are the best in class retailers, the top 20% of our survey respondents, then we're able to understand what are their unique characteristics. What makes them unique in terms of the strategies they deploy? What makes them unique in terms of the technologies they utilize? And again, we'll be sharing those insights as we go along. So to set the stage, we talked about how mobile is reshaping the retail industry and how it's changing consumer behavior. So to get started, we'd like to share some interesting statistics that came through both our research as well as other research that was done on the topic in the industry. As you'll see on the particular slide that you have on your screen, each and every day, an average consumer is spending close to 2 hours on their mobile device, whether it be a smartphone or a tablet. So we're all spending a significant amount of time, which is a great opportunity for retailers. The research that we've done here in Aberdeen Group on e-commerce and how that's impacted through mobile devices shows us that more than half of e-commerce interactions are actually taking place through mobile devices. And when it comes to sales through mobile devices, that's about 30%. And during the 2015 holiday season, Black Friday and Cyber Monday, for example, conversions related to mobile interactions were more than twice as much compared to conversions related to desktop interactions. And what we learned from other research available on the topic is customers are tending to leave, they're opting to leave a site if your site is not mobile friendly. That is, if they need to pinch and zoom excessively, they will likely leave your website to go to other providers. And we've also learned that mobile engagement overall has grown by almost 50% over the past 12 months. So we'll be expanding on those topics as we go along. And to begin, we'd like to hand it off to Ross to share a little bit more insights into how mobile engagement in particular is impacting retailers. Ross, would you like to share some of your insights and expertise on that topic, please?
Sure, yeah. Basically what I want to do at this point is, Omar has used the term mobile and mobile engagement, and many people just sort of wonder how we might define that. And it's an interesting question because the retailers that we interact with, depending on where they fall sort of on the spectrum of mobile expertise, but many of them say something like this. They say, look, we know that our customers are using mobile devices increasingly to contact us. They're either calling from those devices or texting us or emailing or chatting from those devices, and we simply do the best that we can do. It's a very sort of reactive answer to the question. It may be realistic, it may be true, but it's a pretty reactive response to what mobile engagement is and what we think it should be. We think a better answer, and what we hope to hear more in the future, and there are certainly companies and customers that we work with that really do think about mobile engagement differently. It really should be a proactive approach, it's an operational practice, including an organized and intentional set of actions, processes, people, and technology. So mobile is something that you should do on purpose. It's not something that happens to you. It's something that you foster. It's something that you are well aware of. It's something that you can build competitive advantage around. Let me give you an example that all of us have probably experienced, a very small example of companies that I think it's a good indicator that they're thinking about mobile engagement the right way. So if you've ever been on a phone call, if you ever called for service or for sales or for whatever reason, a company, and the person on the other end of the phone has asked you this question, are you on a mobile device? And if you say, yes, I am, and what's that number in case we become disconnected? That is a company that is thinking differently and correctly about mobile. Mobile is different. Yes, you can experience connectivity problems if you're driving in a car, so forth and so on. So those agents have been trained to think about that customer in a different way. And we believe that you can do that not just through a phone channel, but through all channels. And that's some of the material that all of us will be covering today. But I thought it would be helpful to start with just that definition. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Amir.
Great. Thank you so much, Ross. And couldn't agree more in terms of really the confusion in the marketplace around mobile and how it really refers to something very specific. That is, it refers to simply devices, things such as smartphones, tablets, and increasingly wearable devices, and how they represent an opportunity for retailers in particular to engage consumers through those devices. So up on the screen, we have provided a snapshot of what are the most widely adopted forms of devices that retailers are targeting consumers through. As you will see, smartphones are up top on the list, followed by tablets. But also, we do hear quite a bit of and see quite a bit of confusion in the market around mobile as a channel. So we'd like to really debunk that myth. That is, there are channels that are enabled by mobile devices. So it's not just a phone conversation through a smartphone, for example. You can interact with consumers through mobile websites, mobile apps, both HTML5 and native apps, but also text messaging. And again, the use of mobile devices by consumers is providing all those opportunities, all those different channels for retailers to be interacting with consumers, the omnipresent consumers who are now using those mobile devices to do product reviews, to do press comparisons through their mobile devices as they shop. And earlier we talked about the holiday season in 2015, and what have you learned from that? In particular, how does that impact retailers as it aligns to mobile? So very briefly, some of the learnings that we had from last year's holiday season is that consumer spend keeps growing. Up until 2014, since the Great Recession, we've seen an uptick on the average consumer spend. As you've seen, as of 2014, that was close to about $800 per consumer. The trend is continuing to go up, and the consumer spend is a little bit over $800 in 2015 again. But what you will see here, which is validated by this particular chart, is that the pace of increase has slowed down. So consumers are spending more and more each year, but the pace of increase in that spend has slowed down. So what that means for our audience today, for our attendees, is that we need to get mobile right, because consumers are demanding, as we've seen earlier, to interact with brands through mobile devices. In order to be able to capture the wallet share of those consumers, we need to make sure that we design the right strategy. So what does that right strategy involve? Well, it really involves addressing what keeps retailers up at night to begin with. And that was one of the very questions we asked in one of our recent surveys on retail executives' agenda. And what we found up top is that retailers are challenged by understanding what channels are consumers using to interact with brands. Are they using live chat? Are they using mobile web or text messaging? Whatever the right set of channels are, retailers are trying to keep up so that they can add those channels or they can manage those channels effectively. But equally important is the ability to deliver consistent and personalized messages across all those channels. So it's not just important to have the right channels, but it's critical to use those right channels in the right way. So to that effect, Ross, I know you have a lot of experience and insights in terms of the benefits of mobile adoption, how getting mobile right as a strategy influences the sales numbers for a lot of retailers. Would you like to share some of those insights and observations with us, please?
Yeah, and I think I'll key off the first result you had there about sort of channels, because we've done some research in this area as well. Each year we produce a report called Effective Mobile Engagement. We've done it for 2 or 3 years now, really to better understand consumers' use of mobile, what channels they use. And the chart that's being shown here is across some different selling scenarios, so sales scenarios like using your mobile device to do product research, using your mobile device to actually purchase, to actually buy, using your mobile device to follow up on a purchase that you've already made, those types of scenarios. What we find is that those who say that they do this either frequently or all the time, so that's the top 2 box, that's the result that you're seeing here. And you notice 2 things about it. You notice that that they use the channel more. There's growth, year-over-year growth, because we're showing 2 years of data here. But the other thing that is maybe somewhat surprising is when you're asking people, what channel do you utilize when you contact a retailer, and you're talking specifically about a mobile device, you would expect that phone calls would be extremely high. And it is high, but it's not the highest. Other channels are actually pretty important too, email being one of them. We hear a lot that, email is dying, it's going away, it's being replaced, and year over year, we find in our research that's just not true. And especially with mobile devices, people are definitely using email. But they're using other channels as well, like live chat, social media, texting. And last year, for the first time, we asked about video chat usage. And you can see it's small, but it's still there. It's less than 10%. Maybe it'll be over 10% this year when we do the research again. But Amir talked about retailers, being worried about channels. Well, I think you should be. Based on this research, channel usage is certainly prolific, and especially on mobile devices. However, I think there's some good news. Maybe you'll look at this chart as bad news, but I look at it as good news. The experiences, by and large, that are being delivered through mobile devices are not that good. We ask people, okay, so you've engaged a company before from your mobile device. What kind of company? We ask them that, what kind, and you can see we've circled retail there in red. And then we say, and how satisfying was that mobile experience, that mobile engagement? And you can see no one is doing very well. There is some positive news in that there was growth year over year, so that's good. We're at least moving in the right direction. But still, to be satisfying, this is, I'm either satisfied or extremely satisfied, and to be satisfying only 2/3 of consumers is just not that good of a benchmark. I think if you look, most people strive for high 70s, 80s, high 80s for a metric like a satisfaction rating like this one. So why do I think this is good news? I think it's good news because I see it as opportunity. So I think a lot of folks make the mistake of not treating mobile as its own sort of discipline, and I think that shows here. If you do, however, I think that you can really carve out some competitive advantage in the marketplace. So that's why I look at it as good news. So maybe it's keeping you up at night, but maybe it should be keeping your competitors up more. With that, I think I'll turn it back to Omir for the next slide.
Great, thank you for that, Ross. And there's also some additional research on the topic as far as why mobile matters and how it influences the customer experience. Here's a snapshot of what we see, that is, companies that are not getting mobile right are risking losing business because consumers are telling that if they do get a poor experience, if they need to excessively pinch and zoom, for example, as they interact on a mobile website or elsewhere, they are likely to prefer other providers. So to your point, Ross, once again, mobile does keep retailers up at night, but it should not be perceived as a threat. It should be perceived as an opportunity, which is what we're going to focus on now. That is, why mobile is an opportunity for many retailers. Well, specifically, early on, we talked about best-in-class retailers, as we mentioned, that will be looking into their characteristics. And we see here that the best-in-class retailers that do design top-notch mobile strategy are actually seeing far greater results compared to all the other retailers out there. So what are those results? We've used 4 metrics to identify what makes a best-in-class mobile retailer. The first 2 metrics are here, right up at the screen, and those include current customer retention rates and annual change, that is improvement in CSAT scores. And this was agnostic based on how you measure CSAT. You might be using NPS or any different form of measurement. But as you will see, there's a big gap, a big margin between the best-in-class and all other retailers. So what we learned here is that if you're looking to improve customer experience outcomes, we highly recommend following the lead of the best-in-class by adopting their activities, which we will discuss shortly. Additionally, we use 2 other metrics to identify what makes a best-in-class mobile retailer. Those 2 metrics are financial, and those include annual change in company revenue and annual improvements in average order value. Basically, getting transactions right, optimizing the results from mobile transactions, and also optimizing the customer relationships overall so that we can grow customer spend. And once again, the best-in-class are outperforming the annual improvements compared to all others with a wide margin. So what are the unique characteristics that the top-performing companies, the ones in dark blue here on the screen, have in comparison to all other retailers out there? Well, the common theme across those businesses is that they know their customers. They put the processes in place to understand the changing needs of their consumers. And as you'll see toward the left, the companies in dark blue here, the best-in-class retailers, are roughly about 50 to 60% more likely to enable consumers with the ability to compare products, different products on a single screen on a mobile device. That means that they understand the consumer preferences, that consumers are using mobile devices to compare products, to do price comparisons or features, so that they're addressing that need to enable the shoppers to seamlessly manage their own journey. Towards the right, you will see that they also connect the disparate touch points. So if a consumer is using a desktop to go on a website versus a mobile application on a smartphone, a consumer would be able to run a perpetual shopping cart across all those different touch points. And they can add an item through one touch point, and they can check out through another touch point. Once they do provide that ability, once again, as we all know, the consumer's effort is minimized, and ultimately the consumers are rewarding those retailers with increased spend on their products. Additional findings here illustrate that understanding the consumers is critical to be able to deliver automated alerts. So if a consumer added an item into the shopping cart and they didn't purchase it yet, if the item is about to be run out, if it's almost out of stock, we can send an alert to the consumer to let them know that there's only so many of those items left, so that they really understand that we're an advocate for their needs. But ultimately, that also helps us as a retailer to maximize the sales opportunities. So with that, Ryan, we'd like to turn it over to you briefly now to hear a little bit of your insights on how brands are personalizing the consumer conversations by really understanding the consumers, but also enabling their internal stakeholders, such as their contact center agents, to manage the customer experience.
Absolutely. Thanks, Omer. So earlier we talked a little bit about understanding what it takes to achieve success in the mobile engagement, and we feel that a key component of that success really comes from the direct connection with the customer, whether we're providing customer service or sales, and truly understanding the interaction. We've seen that mobile device users engage differently as it relates to service and sales, and have really come to expect a more direct and concise interaction. So specifically, what we've done when it comes to delivering that service is, we're brief and concise as part of the engagement. Many times the mobile user has limited time or characters or even screen space to engage. So keeping those responses and interactions brief and direct are critical. The second piece of that is being assumptive when we're engaging with the customer, and specifically it relates to the way we are driving revenue and selling within the mobile channel. We typically assume that the customer wants to buy, and Omer had mentioned that a mobile user is even 2 times more likely to purchase using a mobile device versus a more traditional PC. So making sure that we're assumptive in the conversation and the close is equally important. Understanding the customer history, making sure that we have the right technology in place is important to really have a firm background on the customer's buying habits as well as previous interactions that you've had, and really understanding the preferences of the customer. And then real-time results. Most of us are probably aware that mobile users are a little bit more apt to expecting a more real-time resolution using those mobile devices. So not only is it important to understand the interaction, it's also important to understand the urgency of that interaction. Oftentimes the customer may be interacting through their mobile device while they're specifically in front of your product or your brand and require that real-time and immediate resolution. Other times the customer may just need to be rerouted to a different method of communication or channel. So we strongly advise that your brand is planning accordingly and being able to allow that customer, if the issue or problem is not being resolved through their mobile device connection, revert them to another option. And then third, we find that this is probably the most important, and that is, training your frontline service or sales teams accordingly. Emphasize the need for concise and proficient communications, and be sure to train agents on the way people engage from a mobile perspective, from the language that they use and the different writing styles that they use, and then empower them to do so. So back to you, Omer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ryan. And to your last point especially, some of our recent research around agent experience management shows that this is exactly one of the areas where the best-in-class contact centers and best-in-class retailers are very much focused on, to really give the employees the ability to seamlessly manage the different channels so that customers are not getting a subpar experience. They're still using the channels they prefer, but they're not getting the experience they like. So again, that sort of employee training and empowerment component is absolutely critical. And so far, we've learned some of the attributes about best-in-class. We learned that they tend to know their consumers much more than all the other retailers out there. We've learned that mobile is reshaping the retail industry. The second building block that we've determined through our research is the importance of blending mobile engagement within the omni-channel programs. So very briefly, to talk about omni-channel, I think we need to first understand how do we come to the age of omni-channel. Well, it all started with, as I'm sure we're all familiar, with multi-channel, where there are a lot of retailers were focused on simply adding more and more channels in the current channel mix to be able to engage the customers, to be able to engage the shoppers through the channels they prefer. And as of early 2014, our research here at Aberdeen Group showed that fully all retailers, fully 100% of retailers were using multiple channels. In fact, as of late 2015, an average retailer today is using 4 channels to interact with consumers. So what that means is multi-channel today, simply using multiple channels, is not enough to succeed in customer experience management programs. So what's the recipe for success? Well, that has to do with using those channels effectively, specifically delivering consistent and personalized messages across all those channels. And that really chimes very well with the omnipresent consumer theme. That is, consumers are not changing the channels specifically. They are following the instinct. They're simply using social media because that's where they do their homework before they actually walk into store. So it's critical that we make that channel transition as seamless as we can for the consumers. So what are some of the attributes of best-in-class versus all other retailers when it comes to making omni-channel fit within the mobile engagement framework? Well, as you'll see, there's 2 separate colors within the table. The green highlights are indicative of the challenges that are pertaining to retailers with poor performance, the all others, and the yellow color is indicative of retailers that have top-notch results. As you will see in the second row, lack of integration between enterprise systems such as ERP, e-commerce, CRM, and order management is a challenge that retailers with poor performance are trying to resolve. That has to do with building visibility into the consumer journey across different channels. As you will see in the first row, however, the best-in-class are much less likely to be challenged with that. Rather, they're more so focused on how do we become masters in implementing new technologies and new channels to be able to adapt to the changing needs of consumers. Again, different priorities. What we highly recommend is if you're at the beginner stage, if you're a tire kicker for mobile strategy, start by identifying what channels you're using, start integrating them, and then start building the foundation to add new channels into the mix. I would like to elaborate a little bit more on that based on what we learned to work for the best-in-class. So once again, we have 2 colors here. The companies in dark blue are the best-in-class retailers. And as you will see toward the left, those companies are about 20 to 25% more likely to ensure consistency of messages across different channels, that is, omni-channel interactions. So what that means is if you cannot indicate that every stakeholder out there is able to have the same view of the customer data at the same time, start working with identifying which channels you're currently using to interact with consumers, and test and see if stakeholders in the business are able to see the same view of consumer data at the same time. If that is not the case, bring in the IT team to have that single view of the customer. Once that's available, then we recommend following the lead of the best-in-class by adopting what we have towards the right, that is predicting shopper preferences and needs based on previous insights. That is, applying business intelligence and predictive analytics, for example, to understand which particular consumer group is more likely to use mobile web versus a website through a desktop device, for example. By doing that, we'll be able to understand how should we mobile optimize our website. By doing that, we'll be able to launch targeted marketing campaigns using the right channels. So to that point, Ross, we'd like to briefly turn it back to you to hear a little bit more about what you see some of the top performing brands out there doing as far as implementing personalization and consistency as it relates to particularly mobile channels such as mobile applications, please.
Great, Amir, thanks. Yeah, I'd like to speak about a particular customer who I think is doing this really, really well, and they're doing so in a very, very challenging market and a very challenging environment, and that's Groupon. Groupon mobile is extremely important to Groupon. It is responsible for the majority of their website traffic, and I think actually the majority of conversion behavior now as well. So mobile is really key for Groupon, and we have been working with them for a year or more in order to help them to achieve higher conversions and higher satisfaction rates. And one of the things that they did that I think is really interesting is they have a consistent chat experience no matter how you access chat. And that took a lot of kind of customization effort, a lot of thinking, and design work on their end, but they've done a very good job. So whenever you encounter chat, no matter where it is for Groupon, it's going to look and kind of feel the same. And that's pretty important because one of the places that's critically important to them is inside of the Groupon app. And in fact, on purpose, this is where they deployed chat first. And they did that because they believe, look, anyone who takes the time to download our app and to actually engage in that app is much more likely to be a paying customer. And so that's why they went there first. And they did a very nice job on their implementation. I've got a screenshot of it there, although you couldn't tell because it looks the same everywhere. And they've got an enormous amount of volume that they're dealing with as well. So, they're doing 10,000 in-app chats per week. They're answering that many, and there's many, many more available to them. They've been kind of slowly rolling it out and making it available. So that's, I think, a really good example of what they're doing. They also, are fully aware that mobile is not just about phone calls and chats, but other channels as well. So as a backup, when chat becomes unavailable, they allow consumers to turn to email. So they're kind of welcoming and managing the customer's experience through multiple channels kind of simultaneously. They have some plans to do some more proactive targeting of in-app and also mobile website visitors. So that's kind of around the corner for them. But I hold them up as just a really good example of doing mobile well. And I'll say again, the real underlying foundational reason that I think they are succeeding is because they treat mobile differently, right? It is so important to their business that it is a discipline in and of itself. So it's just part of their daily thinking. It's part of their culture. It's part of how they think about solving problems is they always have a kind of, what about the mobile visitor? What about the mobile customer? So they're always thinking that way. So I think that's a really good example. And Amir, I know you had a couple of thoughts. Maybe we can go back and forth here, but you wanted to maybe make a point, and then I was going to talk a little bit more about this sort of proactive nature.
Yeah, I think this is something that we'd like to highlight based on what we're seeing in the marketplace, both through our research and conversations with end-user organizations, is the need to move beyond reactive to proactive. You highlighted that, Ross, with Groupon example. But we gave an example early on as far as maybe alerting a consumer when an item in their shopping cart is about to become out of stock. Those kinds of proactive communications with consumers, whether it be in the form of an email, a text message, or however, they go a long way for consumers because now you're perceived as an advocate for their needs. And consumers, according to our research, are rewarding brands by spending more with those organizations, by sharing their positive experience through channels such as social media outlets, Facebook, and Twitter, which helps companies elevate the brand awareness. So if you're not already following a proactive approach, in addition to a reactive approach, then we highly recommend balancing your mobile strategy with both. With that, I know, Ross, you have some more insights around how to get started with proactive engagement. What exactly is proactive engagement? So with that, we'll turn it over to you once again.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so this is a topic that we get asked about a lot. by customers and others. And so I thought we would deal with it a little bit here. So, what is proactive engagement? Well, the way we define it is it's both an art and a science of being right where your customers need you, when they need you, and how they need you. There are some myths, I guess some negative myths associated with proactive engagement, although I will draw your attention to that screenshot there. That's a good example of thinking about mobile differently. So what's happening on that phone there is that there is an invitation into a chat interaction that's kind of slid up from the bottom of the screen. And as you can see, it's just been optimized for a touch device, right? It's big. The X to close it is big enough that you could easily put a finger on it. And this is just a good example of thinking about how mobile is different and how you have to think about mobile in a different way. So crafting your invitations so that they render differently and more appropriately for different form factors, I think is something to think about. But in general, proactive, some people think, it can be intrusive, annoying, relentless, those kinds of negative words. It should not be any of those things. And I actually like to tell a story here about just a personal experience where someone was very proactive and I was very appreciative. So I walked into, this is a number of years ago, you can tell it made an impression because I still tell this story. A number of years ago, my wife was getting her PhD, and she was graduating. It was a very long process. She worked very, very hard at it. So I thought I would get her something, really special, really spectacular. So I walked into a retail location. I walked into a Tiffany's with the full intention of buying her what I knew was going to be a pretty expensive ring. I walked in, and literally immediately, as soon as I walked in, someone did approach me, and they asked if they could help me. And I said yes, and I told them that what the situation was, and that I wanted to buy a really nice ring for my wife. And she said, "Okay, just a moment, and I'll have someone come assist you." So then someone else showed up, so I was effectively transferred, right? These are all things that people have negative connotations with. I was immediately approached, I was being transferred to someone else, but the way that it was done, the manner in which it was done, and the timing associated with each of those engagements. When I say I was immediately approached, that's not totally true. It wasn't as soon as I stepped in the store. But as soon as I stepped in the store, I was kind of looking for the rings and I didn't see them. Someone noticed that and came up to me. So it was maybe a couple of beats, a few seconds. And then the time it took for that person to come was not, wasn't immediate. He didn't run up to me, but was timely. And then I was taken back into a back part of the store where this person helped me pick out the ring, and I bought one. And to this day, one of the kind of most amazing retail experiences I've ever had. The follow-up was excellent, and of course, the ring is beloved by my wife. So a really positive story where there was a lot of proactive engagement, but it was all done right. And that's how you can actually do it on websites, on mobile websites as well. And that's what you should be thinking about trying to achieve. So certainly we've all had retail experiences that were not done that way, that were intrusive, that were annoying, and that's because they got the fundamentals wrong. The timing was wrong, the manner was wrong, and so you need to pay attention to those things. So I put a few best practices here for proactive chat. And after this, I'll turn it back over to Amir for kind of a wrap-up of key learnings, and then we'll have some time left for questions. But first with the best practices. So I mentioned this already, and I showed a screenshot, but again, mobile is different, and you definitely want to use either mobile optimized or mobile aware chat windows and invitations so that the person on the mobile device doesn't have to be horizontally scrolling. They're not taken away from your website when they engage you in a chat when you've invited them into one. I recommend that if you are in a high volume setting like Groupon is, that you use a least busy distribution algorithm. There's different ways to distribute incoming chats, and depending on the type of organization that you are, the type and the amount of volume that you have, it can impact the wait time of your end customers. So if you're in a really busy type of setting, use the least busy algorithm, which most kind of enterprise chat solutions have. What this does is it automatically looks for the agent who is the least busy to give the chat to. It's different than, say, a round-robin technique, which is like dealing cards. And that one, in high-volume settings, can actually end up making customers wait longer. Ideally, you want to throttle your chat operations based on your current staffing. So that's both for kind of reactive and proactive, but especially proactive. So you don't want to be in the situation where you're sending invitations out, and then when someone accepts them, you have to tell them, oh, sorry, there's no one available. So again, a lot of kind of enterprise-sized chat products have a throttling capability that is aware of your agent's workload and will throttle down the number of invitations being sent out across the website in accordance with how much availability you have to actually accept those invitations that are outstanding. I mentioned that proactive is a bit of art, a bit of science. Well, the science part means you need to always be measuring and optimizing and testing. So, website visitor behavior changes. They spend more or less time on certain pages because of either content changes or just cultural changes. You need to constantly be testing your invitation rules to make sure you're maximizing those engagements. Another very interesting thing that we're seeing a lot of customers do is they're integrating some level of self-help into the chat experience to attempt to solve the customer's issue before a chat agent is even needed. So there are lots and lots of circumstances where based on the visitor's behavior, you might know they're looking for a particular thing, if they're trying to figure out what a return policy is, so forth and so on. And by integrating a kind of automatic answer capability, antecedent before the chat experience, you can actually answer the customer's question a lot faster without having to connect them to an agent. And of course, the benefit there is now you have chat agents more available for kind of deeper conversations. So that's something to consider as well. So those are some best practices for being proactive. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Amir to wrap things up and get us into the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Ross, for sharing those insights. And once again, couldn't agree more in terms of getting proactive right to make sure that the consumers are engaged and they keep spending more. And we've gone on a long journey today. We've gone through learning about a lot of different insights through both research and best practices that are observed out in the field. So we'd like to do a quick wrap-up based on what we learned before we open up for Q&A. So the highlights of our journey today so far has been that mobile, as a term, is referring to a set of devices such as smartphones, tablets, and smart watches, wearables, for example. And it is not referring to an individual channel. Those devices enable retailers to target consumers through channels such as mobile web, text messaging, and mobile applications. Another finding that we learned is that consumers are omnipresent, that is, they're using multiple channels, but they're not thinking in terms of channels. Hardly any consumer is actually starting their journey thinking in their mind that they should first use social media, then they should have a live chat conversation before they walk into the store. They follow their instincts on how they want to shop. They follow what is convenient for them. So it is critical that we understand the consumer needs and we enable consumers to use their channels of preference to interact with the brand. And we talked about the importance of mobile optimizing the content of your website, that is, for example, but it's also critical that this content is relevant to your consumers. So if a consumer was looking up, say, black sweater, for example, on your search box, we should make sure that we present them with relevant content based on their search results. That's going to help them, again, streamline their shopping experience and maximize your potential to drive more sales through those mobile interactions. And finally, becoming a go-getter means that you're not just reacting to consumer needs, but actually proactively engaging consumers based on what they need or based on what you anticipate that they need so that you can deliver a greater service and sales experience. So with that, we'd like to hand it over to Bennett, who will be helping us moderate the Q&A session at that point. Bennett, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Omer. That brings us to the conclusion of our presentation portion of the webinar. We're now moving to the Q&A portion. If you have any additional questions, you can still submit them using the Q&A widget on the left-hand side of your screen. The first question we have is for Ross, and this is in reference to slide 15, the mobile engagement channels slide from earlier in the presentation. Now, the slide indicates that the individual channels are showing a year-over-year decrease, yet you said it was increasing across the board. Could you explain the sort of apparent discrepancy there?
Yes, I can, and my apologies for that confusion. When I said increasing across the board, I was actually referring to information that I wasn't showing. So I totally understand the confusion. Here's what I meant by that. So if you look at our effective mobile engagement report from 2015, and you actually look at the first figure that's in the report, that measures the increase in mobile engagement across a variety of scenarios that we test, and that did increase across the board. So mobile engagement itself is increasing. What we then did is we said, okay, so if you have engaged before with a retailer, let's say, what channels have you used to engage with them? And this is a question that people can select more than one. So I've called them before, I've live chatted with them before, and I've done social media before. And that's why if you added up the numbers on that on the slide that I did show, it's well over 100% in total. And so what's happening there is, yes, there are some decreases, but really what it's measuring is, I think, a shifting in channel behavior. Because one channel was not available in the 2014 version, and that would be video chat. So, live chat went down, but video chat appeared and went up. And if you added those two things together, then live chat actually went up year over year. So I think that was the confusion. What I meant was mobile engagements in general are definitely increasing, and the research showed that. And then what channels are you using? There is some movement. There's some differences year over year. I don't think those differences are all that concerning. It still shows lots of channels are in use through mobile. It's not just the phone that's dominant. Email is important, and other channels are in use too.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification. Now, this is a much more general question, so whoever can speak to it, feel free to weigh in. What is the number one complaint with consumers who use mobile?
Sure. I'll take a stab at it, folks, and then if anybody would like to chime in to add some insights. We see the complaints vary across different businesses. For some, it is the fact that retailers are not using the right channels to engage with the consumers. So oftentimes consumers will say that, well, I'm forced to have a phone conversation, even though I would much rather prefer to converse with the company over text message, for example. So the discrepancy between consumer preferences of channels versus what brands are using is one that is out there. The other one is a little bit more feature functionality related, that is giving consumers the ability to do things such as price comparisons or compare different product features on the website. And as we've seen earlier in the research presentation, those are things that the omnipresent consumers are looking to have more and more as part of their mobile interactions. So lack of those features is yet another complaint that we see retailers face often. With that, Ryan or Ross, would you like to add any additional insights on that?
I know that we've done some research, and I actually think we have some research in field right now, and some initial results are showing that one of the things that consumers complain about is an inability to find support options, contact options. So for whatever reason, I think in mobile website design, either on purpose or by accident, it's not as prominent. So I need to get in touch with someone, I want to send an email or engage in a chat or whatever, and consumers have complained that many of the mobile websites they visit do not make that prominent enough.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, what we've seen is that a lot of companies have not necessarily changed their strategy from an interaction perspective. So, still pushing out, long scripted responses to questions, and not being as concise with their answers when consumers are making inquiries through their mobile devices. All
right, we have a question for Ross here. what have you found is the most effective measure or look of proactive live chat that generates the most chats or conversations, or conversions, excuse me?
So what is the most effective? I didn't hear that second part.
The most effective measure of proactive live chat that generates the most chats or conversions.
Okay. Well, there's certainly lots of ways to measure proactive effectiveness. We recommend a couple. So one is certainly just an acceptance rate, right? So that is simply the invitations that are being offered compared to those that are actually being accepted. And we recommend that you measure those a couple of different ways. You want to do it on a rule basis. You want to do it on an invitation basis, because it could be different in different parts of your website, let's say. But I think the one that matters most is conversion behavior. So what we recommend is that you measure the conversion behavior of regular website visitors, those that engage in chat, and those that engage in proactive chat. And what we have found is that the conversion percentage and the average order values for proactive, for those that engage through proactive, on kind of a benchmark basis are higher than all the other ones. So it can be pretty important for a company trying to drive conversions.
All right, Omer, in your wrap-up, you indicated that mobile is a device, not a channel. But wouldn't you also say that mobile is a strategy as well?
Absolutely. There will be a strategy to manage the interactions across those devices, but as a term, mobile will really refer to the devices that consumers are using, but mobile strategy itself as a term will be referring to basically how retailers are planning around communicating with their consumers through those devices. So there could be some term of art in terms of how device versus strategy flows with one another. But overall, I think our point was a little bit more into differentiating between the confusion that mobile is not a channel by itself, but rather a set of devices that enables retailers to communicate with consumers through different channels.
Excellent. Now,
yeah,
Omer, I'm sure
I couldn't agree more. This is Ross. As I said throughout the entire presentation, mobile is different. It needs to be kind of thought about differently, measured differently, and so I absolutely think that it's an operational practice that companies should take on as its own thing, with its own set of objectives and key performance indicators and so forth. So I couldn't agree more. It's definitely a strategy companies should engage in.
Excellent. So on that subject of measuring, how important is it for people to pay attention to their metrics to help improve the sales of their product and their conversion rates?
I mean, we have entire engagements with some of our customers, ongoing engagements that do nothing but that, where we sit with them at least monthly and we look at the numbers, and obviously we're looking at those numbers because we want to take action, and we do. We take a variety of actions with the purpose of increasing whatever the metric is. For some, it's conversions, obviously very important, but also we measure NPS, customer satisfaction. So there's different key performance metrics to look at. And I don't think that you can understate how important it is to sort of always keep your finger on that pulse, always be measuring, always be optimizing, always be testing.
All right, so another question that we have, and this is another general question, is it important to be more personal with your customers?
And I'd like to maybe go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was going to say, so yeah, we find that obviously mobile users have a little bit different of a profile And they've come to expect different levels of service when they're interacting with their brands. And as part of that, I think I touched on it earlier, is really not scripting the responses and the sales approach when you're engaging with your customers. Really empowering the frontline service and sales agents to emulate the brand voice and ensuring that when they're interacting with those people within their that are utilizing their mobile devices, that it's a much more personal touch than even traditionally as it related to service and sales.
Yeah, I mean, one of the recommendations we make is that agents need to know, through visual indicator or something else, that they are talking with someone on a mobile device, and I think there's training implications to that. There's especially like if you're chatting, so you just simply can't type as much, because the screen real estate is so small that you've got to be extra brief in your communication. Otherwise, big paragraphs of text coming across on a phone, just terrible. So there's certainly sort of different rules of engagement for folks who are on mobile. And we have some customers who are way more informal with mobile visitors, and I guess that's part of kind of being personal. It's just, as Ryan said, it's sort of what the mobile visitor is used to, what they expect, and so the agent needs to be cognizant of that so they can act accordingly.
Ryan, could you elaborate a little more on empowering those agents to interact with mobile users?
Yeah, so it's really making sure that your agents are fully aware of their ability to interact with the customer, and what level of how should I say this, scripted versus non-scripted responses and interactions they can have. So making sure your agents are trained. I've referenced it a couple of times on brand voice. Really ensuring that they understand the brand voice, and then empowering them to communicate, kind of based on the specific customer interaction, and allowing them to go again off script to a certain degree, so that it doesn't feel like it's a mechanical response when they're interacting with the consumer. Just really giving them that power and the ability to provide that more personal touch that we were just referencing.
Now, we have a question actually very much on this subject. Being concise in engagement with mobile customers, is text message language such as "you are" or the number 4 for 4, does that come off as offensive? Would older customers not appreciate it as much? Is there any guidance there?
Yeah, so this one, there's a great debate on this one. So we have some customers that do it all the time because they know that that the people who they're talking to, that's what they're used to. Let me give you an example. Forever 21 is a customer of ours, and yes, they use that kind of language all the time, simply because they know that their end users are. So I guess I hate giving the answer "it depends," but I think it's appropriate here. You need to know with whom you are speaking. In general, who your customers are, who's contacting you. And if you do know, and you are certain that this is the type of communication that they are used to and would do themselves, then it's probably okay. It's probably appropriate. If you don't know, if you're unsure about who it is, then don't do it. Err on the side of caution, I would say.
Yeah. And on that, Ross, great insight in terms of really understanding who the customer is. So maybe to really understand who we're talking to, we highly recommend segmenting the audience to understand who exactly is my target audience. Am I speaking with maybe a millennial through a mobile channel or someone else? And what exactly are the common preferences between consumers within that group? So doing that segmentation analysis is absolutely critical to really be able to target the right consumer with the right language. And if unsure, as Ross described, couldn't agree more, be on the side of caution, that is, use the appropriate language.
All right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, everyone. Thank you to Omer, Ross, and Ryan for sharing your research, insights, and recommendations, and thank you to our sponsor, LogMeIn, for making this webinar possible. We do still have some unanswered questions, and if you have any additional questions, you can submit them to Omer, Ross, or Ryan. Their information can be found in the bio widget on the left side. We will try to follow up with your questions as time goes on. We hope you found today's broadcast beneficial, and thank you so much for your participation, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.